Good morning, everyone. Please let me know. I see Mike McAtee is here. He says there's no sound. If you do have sound, let me know if you can hear any of this, what we're doing here this morning. Now you have sound, Facebook user. A couple more people, if you'd let me know that we do have sound, we can get on with the show. I apologize for the delay and a little bit of a technical difficulty that we had, but I think we have sound now. So let's take it from the top one more time. It's 11 o'clock in Hollywood and it's 2 o'clock in Hoboken. Good morning and welcome to Vintage Motocross Radio. I am your host, Joe Abadi. This program is made possible with the help of our sponsors, Preston Petty Products. The legend continues. Amsoil, the first in synthetic oil since 1973. Full Circle Racing, for your spokes, lacing, and truing needs, please visit Full Circle Racing Limited. Vinco, keep the ride going with over 650 products in their catalog. Motion Pro, for specialized tools, cables, and controls. Golan Industries. Go see my friend Elon Golan at Golan Industries for the best little fuel filter you'll ever own. Northwest Mako CZ is a new sponsor. Please visit their website or follow them on Facebook. Lanny J, for quality fabrication of aluminum gas tanks as well as frame modifications. Please follow Lanny J on Facebook. Whether you're listening from your phone or your computer, please take a moment to share the show with your friends. And don't forget, I am using StreamYard. So there is a little link there that asks you to allow StreamYard to see your name. If you click on that, I'll be able to see your name when you comment. If not, it just comes through as a Facebook user, and I don't know who exactly is making a comment. Now, Susie's here shaking her head saying she doesn't have sound, but I got 6 people here that say they do. So I'm not sure exactly what the problem is. How could some of you have sound and some of you not have sound? You have your phones turned up, you have your speaker on. He says he's got audio. Scott Cox doesn't have audio.
Would you turn it completely down?
Turn completely, did I turn completely what down? Everything's plugged in, everything's on. A couple of people here say, I hear you just fine, and I've got great sound, yes.
Ed Boca, no sound.
Well, maybe Ed Boca should turn up his volume or check something.
Mine's all the way up.
I'm not sure exactly what's happening here, folks. Some people say they have. Some people say they have sound. Some people say they do not. I'm not sure whether to continue on with this or start over again.
No sound here. Wilma finger.
I have good sound. I have great sound. It says here.
Really?
Yeah. A lot of people are saying they can hear it just fine. So I'm not sure. John Elliott says he has sound. George Brown. What do we do here? I think I'm going to keep going. I'm not sure what else I can do. I mean, I could try one more time, but if some of them have sound and some of them don't.
I'm going to go completely out and come back.
Yeah, maybe you should try that. Here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to continue on. Please share the show with any of your friends. Have them come down, listen to Vintage Motocross Radio. We'll have a really great guest here for you in just a moment. In fact, my guest this morning has been a part of the motorcycle industry for over 45 years, growing up in the hotbed of motocross, Southern California. He spent a lot of time not only as a racer, but also developing his talent as a highly skilled machinist as well. During those years, he was employed by DG Performance, where he was part of their race team and also tuned for such great racers as Mike Bell, Chris Heiser, Gary Semix, and Brian Myerscough. As an independent contractor, he was often called in by the factories to help maximize performance of some of their most exotic work bikes of the era. Today, he owns and operates a very successful shop in Southern California. It is called Boyko Racing, and it is my privilege this morning to have Ted Boyko with me. We're going to get him on the phone right now, and we're going to continue with our interview. Again, I'm sorry for that slight delay that we had a little bit early. Ted.
How are you?
I'm good. You're live on the air. I had a little bit of a problem with sound a moment ago, but now everybody says it's okay. So I apologize for that and for being a couple of minutes late with you. But we're live with Ted Boyko on Vintage Motocross Radio.
Right on. Thanks for having me on. I'm honored to be on the show.
Oh, Ted, it's always a pleasure to have you to be hanging around with you, whether I see you at a race or at some social event. You know, you have that positive aura around you all the time. Everybody loves you. You got that big smile going, and there's always a positive vibe. You're like the Sammy Davis Jr. of motocross, Ted. You know.
Oh, I'm glad that everybody thinks of me that way. You know, I try to be positive attitude most of my whole life as much as I can.
Yeah.
You know, I'm glad that I bring that vibe. I'm glad that you think of me that way. First off, I'd like to thank my wife for putting up with me all these years.
Yeah.
And I'd like to thank my brother Ken and my other twin brother Scott Cox for getting photos together for you last minute.
Yeah.
And just so I'm excited to do the show and ready to rock.
All right, Ted. I mean, that sounded like an acceptance speech at the Academy Awards. I didn't know where you were going with that. You know? Hey, Ted, let me ask you something. You know, you've got a great shop going on right now. You've been in the industry a long time, but you have a shop in Laguna Hills right now. Tell us about that and what you do there.
Well, I'll tell you, it's started out, you know, in Costa Mesa about 11 years ago, Boyko Racing. Prior to that, I was at Mission Motorsports for 16 years. And so I decided to go on my own, and it's been really, really successful. And now I'm here in Laguna Hills, which is in a prime spot. Location-wise, we're just, you know, right up 5 and the 405, which makes it really convenient for all the local dealerships around me, and I'm pretty grateful for that because I do all the crankshafts and cylinder heads, whether it's a watercraft shop or Harley shop, or it doesn't matter, a hole's a hole. So those guys keep me busy alone. Just the local dealerships, Ducati dealers and multi-line dealerships feed me crankshafts, cylinder heads, and etc.
Right.
So that alone keeps me going. But then I've you know, do a lot of my own motors under the Boyko Racing umbrella. You know, I've had an ad in Racer X for quite a few years now, and that brings in a lot of my mail order stuff. And the majority of the stuff that I do is mail order. Heads going out the door. I ship cranks every day to, you know, shops in Tennessee. A Honda dealer the other day, crankshaft to him. Five Valley Honda. I can't remember all the dealers I ship to, but I'm grateful for all these dealers that ship me stuff, you know, cranks and heads and cylinders to keep me rolling.
Yeah. You know, Ted, your name was prominent in the industry. Most people, of course, I mean, the older guys remember you from the original DBG Performance Race Shop, and we're going to talk more about that in depth a little bit later on. But exactly. I discovered also in my research along the way that, you know, you were a racer too back in the day. And where did you first begin racing, and when did you first get into dirt bikes?
Well, you know, my brother Ken, I'll tell you, we weren't supposed to have dirt bikes in our family, Joe. It's Italian family. My mom's a Shortino, hardcore. They said nobody was going to have a two-wheeled motor vehicle. That's what they called it, you know, in this house. And somehow I had in fourth grade, my first thing that my godfather gave me was a snare drum. That was really one of the biggest things I really thrived on. And then my brother Ken at Christmas rolls in and, you know, I think pissed the parents off actually, because I blew them off whatever gift it was. My brother Ken rolls in this Taco mini bike that he had restored, that he found in a farm with his buddy over in Placentia. So I don't know how he found it, but he stripped it, painted it this really awesome candy tangerine, and you have no idea, when he rolled us in the front door, my parents were pissed.
Oh,
but
sure.
Yet it was just, I can't say it right now what I had. That's how happy I was.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
And it was just, and since that day, it was either the drums or or mini bikes. And so I have to really be grateful from the Morwoods, and who had a lot to do with my mini bike racing. NMA was like the CMC Golden State Series grooming the Barnetts and those guys back in the era, but we were grooming mini bikes guys that no one even knew about. National Mini Bike Association was Cycle Town, a little Norwalk town shop that the Morwoods started the NMA out of.
Now, Ted, what year is this about?
Oh God, my era of racing started in probably 68, 69, 70, and I ended up in 73s when I ended up racing.
Oh, okay.
But I was a factory Indian racer with Mike Brown. And,
Yeah.
And another reason why this all happened is my brother Ken was working at Indian Motorcycle Company at the time. And I'll name all the names who were there. It was Bob Messer. He was a prominent name in the SoCal motocross industry. His brother Luke, they were both racers. But at that time, there was this guy named Larry Broyles. He was an engineer there who really had a lot to do with all the R&D, developing these Italian engines with these Taiwanese frames. And there was a guy named Keith Mullins and my brother. There was about 6-8 guys running this thing out of Gardena. Mike Brown and myself were pretty much the only riders they had. And Bob Messer at the time was actually he was the test rider / worked in the service department with Larry Broyles, one-on-one in the back. But Broyles was also grinding cylinders back in the day, and that's kind of how I kind of started grinding. My brother was doing some nibbling at it, and we're all doing little grinding stuff on Hodakas and Indians, and that's kind of where I started seeing everybody port cylinders. But I was racing for these guys with Mike Brown and had a pretty good career at the time. I ended up, breaking my femur. Well, that's what ended up my career. Ended up putting me in the hospital. I was at Indian Dunes.
Okay.
Me and Mike Brown. So the end of my career, it was a pretty scary day. It was at Indian Dunes. Me and Mike Brown, they brought in this prototype, brand new Indian. They had all these guys. There were some Taiwanese guys there, some Italians there, because they were pretty much Minarelli engines with Taiwanese frames. And so they have their prototype there, and me and Mike are there to test this brand new bike. It's the only one they have. So it's never been ridden. And I start the bike up, warm it up, and it's kind of been known as a pit squid. A lot of kids have been hit there and broke legs and whatever, but it happened to be me that day. And I put the thing in first gear and putted it out of between the two vans. I'll never forget it.
I'm sure.
Turn left, I go to the starting line to test it. Mike's sitting in the grandstands with all these guys with clipboards, and trying to test the first prototype. Never made it to the track. I get T-boned by some guy in a Honda Twin with a red metal plate helmet, no visor, pinned, and hits me on the right side, breaks my femur, tibia, and fibia. All compound fractures, totals the bike. The bike's not rideable, and that was pretty much the end of the career of my racing career. And I went in the hospital for 49 days. Stuck me up in Newhall. They were gonna chop the leg off because they didn't know what to do. And it was a bad deal. And so I remember they rushed me to with a full wobbler leg, tibia, fibia, all just it was a mess. And they took me to Fullerton and did a full surgery called spinal tap. And that's how they fixed me. I was in there, and back then it was a 50-50 deal coming out of a spinal tap if you'd be paralyzed or not.
Yeah.
And so my parents and family were all worried about me and stuff. And so, but it was a lot of rehab. And make a long story short, I came out of it, and I'm rocking today. I'll tell you straight up, I'm considering broken femur, tibia, fibia, and plus broke it 2 other times because I didn't listen to the doctor. Went straight to go race again because he says, you know, Ted, it's like a weld. You ought to know better. It's like a weld and it's going to break somewhere else. So I thought I'd be Johnny Race it again and did some local OCIR night stuff with Bruce McDougall and all my local buddies and tried, and always, you know, I'm always looking back instead of looking straight and see how big a lead I had and go over the bars again and broke it again.
You broke the same leg again?
Oh, yeah. I have 5 breaks in my right leg. The rest of the body's perfect. But my right leg is a mess.
Wow.
But I'm grateful to be walking and I'm doing really well.
Good. So now, Ted, after the injury, and then you're not really racing anymore, are you still hanging around the shop at Indian and learning these, you know, tuning techniques, or where does it?
No, I'll tell you how it all started. It was high school.
Okay.
I was junior, senior in high school, and I was a metal shop. I love metal shop. I just, you know, I loved it. It was just one of my things. I could pretty much hop on a lathe and a mill, and we even had a foundry. We had shears. I made my own, rolled my own cones on I made a downpipe for my YZ, and, you know, and that of course I crushed it the first time out because it looked like, you know, it was not, it wasn't like a Bassani or anything else. It was mine. So, but the metal shop was my thing. And so, make a long story short, I had this teacher that was awesome named Mr. Allen, who took a liking to me and kind of let me run the show in there because I could read the micrometer. You had to learn how to read these things. And if you couldn't read, I remember him telling me, if you can't read this thing, then get out of the class.
Mm-hmm.
You can't read the micrometer, get out of class, period. And so, you know, a lot of kids struggle reading the micrometer. And I pretty much read old school. I still have old school tools to this day. So that our metal shop, make one story short, had everything. It was we had like 4 lathes, couple mills, and it was all old school stuff, analog. And I'm still analog to this day.
Yeah.
I have all old school stuff. So I kind of take or say that Mr. Allen had a lot to do with what I did. And then right after that, I went straight to a Honda dealership. Right after high school, that was in '75, I went straight to Hacienda Honda. And they had this race team. And that I rolled there. It was a good experience for me because, you know, that's where I kind of started porting heads more in a volume, doing crankshafts in a volume. We started manufacturing our own pipes because they had their own race team, Hacienda Honda.
Now, wasn't Jeff Ward there at that time, little kid?
No, Jeff at that time was racing. When I was racing, we were racing against one another.
He was at Mission or something.
That's right. And me and Jeff raced against one another. I beat him a lot. We're still close to this day.
Yeah.
I actually beat him at the Mini Mint. I mean, I won the Mini Mint. That was a big deal for my career, racing. I didn't mention that. You know, I actually had an accomplished there for Indian. We beat Honda by 17 minutes. And Jeff was one of the riders. And there was a lot of famous riders at the time that I think Jimmy Hawley was racing that race at the time when it was before this. And so, yeah, Jeff was kind of, and actually I raced with Jeff at El Toro Raceway. That's how far back we go. I raced El Toro Raceway, which was this little tiny track. It was at 68, 69. So I actually have trophies in here. Look at the trophies. I have a ton of trophies from El Toro Raceway in 1973.
Wow.
And I remember racing there with Jeff, and there was a handful of people who raced there at this little night track. It was cool. Right down the street from my shop here. And it was a little oval. Not too many people know it. And they had a little wooden ramp. And we would jump out of the wooden ramp, go into the woods with these shitty lights in the background. And I remember it was Morris Ballone, Bruce McDougall, Gary Cotcho, Bob Messer, Jeff Ward, Gene Woods, me, and a handful of the Currys. There's this Curry family was famous doing off-road stuff. The Currys were really big in going down there, influenced us because we all went to school together.
Right.
But what a life that we had down here, there was nothing where my shop is here was actually all citrus. We'd come down, it was foggy, it was scary coming down on Friday night motocross. I remember just coming down and dead fog. Bruce Barron would be racing that night, and the only thing there was a Bob's Big Boy and a mobile gas station. And it was such a big deal for us leaving that race and then going afterwards, as maybe a handful of us guys would all go. And all famous guys that would go that became famous riders. I mean, even the Mosiers and a lot of famous guys come out of there, and we'd all go to the Bob's Big Boy.
And that was life as a kid racing mini bikes in Laguna Hills back in the late 60s, early 70s. What an amazing time it must have been. I'm sure.
Oh, blessed.
Now, Ted, you said something about being at Mission Honda. How many years were you there?
Well, I wasn't at Mission. I was at Hacienda.
I'm sorry, Hacienda. Yeah, Hacienda. How many years were you there?
I would say there probably 2 years, maybe 2-3 years. And what my position really was just building engines for their race team. We had 3 riders. I'll name the riders. Bobby Jones was one of them.
Right.
And Jimmy Hawley was my main rider that we built. And there was only 2 mechanics at the time that actually ran that whole race team. It was called PK Racing. It was this man named Paul Cates. His parents owned 2 Honda dealerships. One of them was Ontario Honda, was real big at the time. And then they owned Hacienda Honda, but they let his son have a race team with a catalog with all these accessories with heads, valves. So that's where I started getting on the lathe and tuliping valves and porting heads in a big volume. And I noticed that those guys were making lots of money doing this, selling at volumes. And, you know, our competition at the time, there was J&B Racing, Mission Honda, and several others that were doing similar stuff. But PK became pretty prominent at the time. And Jimmy was he ended up being a little mini bike champion and at the NMA Mini World Grand Prix.
Jimmy Hawley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his father, Al, had a lot to do with it. We were all close at the time. Al was a plaster. Jimmy was just this fast rider, was strong than any of these guys back in the day, and flat out kicked their ass, pretty much. And that's pretty much how I put it. And fun to be with always. I love to be with Al and him. And I mean, the group of people that we were with, the Morwoods, were putting these races on to allow all of us to groom these kids as mini bikes coming out. And I got to say, Ted, Patty, Lance, if it wasn't for the Morwoods and the Hendricksons, I don't think none of us would be where we are today.
Yeah.
I mean, and that goes for Jody Weisel and every other person on the planet who's Ted Morwood influenced so many people. I mean, Rudy Dickinson, Dean Dickinson, we were all competition, but we're all super close friends till this day. I still, in Norwalk, I worked at Cycletown building engines for Brian Myerscough in this little 10 by 10 Cycletown for Morwood, building pipes for Myerscough's machines. That's where I did all these ported all that cylinder heads, did all the heads out of Cycletown for Myerscough machines. So Morwoods had a lot to do with a lot of us people that, you don't hear much of Morwoods. You really don't. But I would say that they were you always heard CMC, Stu Peters, blah, 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 because these guys were famous coming out of Golden State Series on and on and on. But yet, prior to that, these were many guys that had to be groomed before CMC. And there was so many riders other than Jimmy and Bobby Jones. I could go on and on and on. Scott Burnworth, and oh my God, tons race NMA. And I actually, that's where I met, Chris Heiser was one of my, I think we'll get into that, how many guys I worked for, but that's where I met the Heisers at an Indian reservation at an NMA mini bike race in Barone Oaks.
So Ted, now after the Hacienda thing, Did you go right to DG after that? No, you had the Morwood.
I sure did.
Oh, you
But
did?
no, I went to Vulcan. I'm sorry. I started Vulcan Cycle Works right after that on my own.
Okay, so let's talk about that shop for a minute, what you did there, and then we'll transition into your introduction to DG and how you got there. So tell us, how does this Vulcan thing start? What do you do there?
Well, I saw what Hacienda was doing, and me and this Larry King, I was partnered up with us as mechanics. I forgot to mention that Hacienda, we were really tight and close. We lived in the city industry. We were both really like working on hands-on. He was a good machinist. We decided to start Vulcan Cycle Works. We had this we thought he was a rich guy, had a lot of dough. He says, let's start. So I created Vulcan Cycle Works. My older brother was really good at doing logos, who's pretty famous today, Rick from the ad industry. And so he does this bitchin' ass Vulcan logo. And so we start Vulcan Cycle Works with this guy's money. And me and this Larry quit Hacienda Honda right out of the blue. Don't tell Paul Cates, and we go pretty much do similar things as him and start the Vulcan bikes. And we had a niche. We focused on, I made cantilever kits in-house, which was a big thing for Hondas. And then I did the Vulcan racers. We actually shipped bikes across the country. We had a really good thing doing crankshafts. Basically, all the things I did for Hacienda Honda, as far as pipes and cylinder heads and stuff like that, were real similar. But I had my own logo, which was a God of Fire, Vulcan. That was my deal. And so we did this and had a really good time doing it. I was a young kid, didn't really know what I was doing, but I what do I say? Big huevos. I've pretty much run my own gig for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I did pretty well there. I did bikes for, we were actually from racing mini bikes. I was around Steve McQueen, Alan McGraw, and Gene Hackman, because of them and their influence from NMA and being around the Morwoods races and stuff like that, contacted me at Vulcan and asked me to build some package racers for Chris Hackman, Gene Hackman's son.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually, he hired me to try to go out and teach his son Chris how to ride and influence him to go out and start racing and so on. So it was a fun time for me to really learn. And I really, I went out there. This guy had this money. I bought a mill, I bought a lathe, and bought a welder, and did all this stuff. And come to find out, and we were doing really well at the time, and this guy wasn't really backing us. And at the time, the attorney said, "You got to get your shit and get the hell out of there." And that's kind of how the Vulcan thing fizzled out. And that's when the whole DG thing kind of fell into place.
Okay.
And I'll let you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm real interested in knowing. I mean, but by then, I guess it was what, 1978, Ted. By the time all that was. Okay, so DG started cooking back in what, 72, 73?
Well, we were, in 77 is about when Pat Alexander was working with Harry at DG at the time. And he ended up going to working with Danny because he left DG to go work for corporate Suzuki. Pat's, been in my life forever. And so he goes to Suzuki, gets this gig at Suzuki in San Fe Springs, and I get a job at DG, which kind of fell into place.
In 77?
I want to say it was around 77.
Okay. So, Pat Alexander, which, by the way, being we're talking about Pat Alexander, I want to have him as a guest in the next week or so. So put a little bee in his bonnet about that.
I sure will.
Okay.
I sure will.
Okay. So you go over to DG in 77. Harry Clem is already there. And what is your daily job there at DG?
Well, at the time, everybody forgets DG is a Dan and Gary, and that's all everybody ever remembers about, and they only hear Harry Clem. But the bottom line, there's a few people I'm going to name. We were a tight-knit group that made the place rock and roll.
Okay.
And if we would have these people I'm going to name that were in there working together, the place wouldn't rock.
Well, tell me all about it, Ted. I want to know all about it.
Ken Boyko, my brother, he was the back guy that you didn't ever hear.
Okay.
Ken was the guy who was the marketing guru who, because Gary or Dan left, kind of didn't have the really good name. I won't get into that.
Okay.
There's some, I'm sure you can find it on your own. So the D's gone. He's long and gone. So Ken comes in and literally takes this thing to another level and brings in these other writers. But the group that I want to mention, I'll just name the names before I forget, is the core people were Lee Chapin, Tim Buck, Harry, Todd Peterson, Greenway, myself. There was just this tight-knit group that we all worked together to try to make this place better. But it was about being productive too. It wasn't about just going racing or whatever. We had to make product be productive to pay for everybody's paychecks. So, but my brother would hire the Hannahs and get these sponsored riders, and he was the one that made the catalog and took this thing to another level. And that's where this thing really grew. And it took the core group of people. Todd was the guy who made the T-shirts, made our own jerseys. My brother, these guys literally made their own stuff in-house. I mean, when we were making the bicycles, my school buddy from high school, Tom Vernon, he would be in the back building jigs and welding the bicycles in one corner. I mean, we had a lot going on at EG. It was and at the same time, I was tight with FMF. No one else was really tight with FMF other than myself out of DG. I'll stay straight up.
Right.
I've had a friendship with Uncle D since day one. Still do today. I can go over there any day and borrow his dyno and go through the barbed wire fence or whatever I got to do to get in. And the Emler, we've always been close. And even there's a guy who left DG. I didn't mention him in here. Glenn Thomas, who was another core guy at DG, who was unhappy what was going on over there. So I called Uncle D, hey, Uncle D, and got Glenn to go over there. And that's when Donnie lost FMF, went to Roost Factory. Glenn had gone over and done similar things, made a bitching catalog like he took FMF to another level over there. Glenn Thomas did.
Okay.
For FMF.
Okay.
So
Ted, I do want to talk about FMF and the Glenn Thomas thing. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
okay.
I've got a question here that's been on my mind. You're there, and Todd Peterson, your brother Kenny, you guys are rocking and rolling and building all kinds of stuff. And they're like this huge aftermarket motocross industry going on. What was there any part that ever came out of there while you were there that you looked at it and said, "Oh my God, this is amazing! I can't believe they did this." I mean, like a gold anodized radial head. When guys like myself saw that come out, it was mind blowing, So, but you're there doing research and development. What were some of the things that you saw that really stuck out in your head at the time?
God, there was so many.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just tell you straight up because they were really good at making this stuff skin packed and looking pretty for sales. And that's what part of it would be. And I remember bringing in this extruded 22-foot long extruded from Anaheim Extrusion that was this thin stuff that was on the shelf that they just brought in. And we had these clapped out saws. I mean, I'll just tell you straight up that were pretty rough. And I remember no jigs. We just say, okay, we're just chopping this shit up or whatever. It was a YZ 250 or whatever. The whisks were all different or whatever, and then they were all gold anodized. But I loved just about everything went on because everything your eyes would light up the way it was marketed, if you know what I mean.
I
It
do
was
now.
DG
Yeah.
with the always had the sticker and the package, and that was part of the marketing. And same thing was the main thing was my brother had made sure that every rider, if you went to every race, whether there was so many riders that had a sticker, whether it was Brock. Oh, if it wasn't for those guys having them locate the DG location on those helmets and all those places that we were placed, I mean, like Democus, when Democus lived in my brother made sure that there was stickers, DG stuck under the front fender, Willy Wheelie. I mean, that was all part of the marketing for DG. Make sure it was stuck out there. So wherever you were at Supercross, Super Bowl, outdoor moto, the DG thing was out there. That's how it was marketed.
Yeah. I mean, the perceived value of that company. And
Harry, far as everybody talks about Harry. Harry had a lot to do with, and he taught me a lot too back there, to straight up. Harry's taught me a lot back there. I've had a lot of people teach me a lot, and I'm grateful for that. And, the Harrys and the Morwoods and the Broyles, there's a lot of people who's influenced me, and I'm grateful for that. And Harry was one of them. And but he was kind of in charge. And then me and him actually rode bikes down the alleyways. We didn't have dynos back in the day. And you saw some of the stuff we did with the RDs going down the alleyways, tested pipes and heads. And me and him, it was a 2-guy ordeal. There wasn't anybody back there. Todd B-Shirts, Ken and Lee Chape and Tim Buck were really sales, but we had this core group and me and Harry were, one thing I say, we were meticulous, organized. That's one thing that stood out at DG, where when we showed up at a race, I could say Harry that's one thing, he was pretty anal with had to have the gold carpet laid out, double throw down, wherever we went with DG, whether we had our trailer or whatever, we'd roll out this big old gnarly piece of carpet, me and Harry, throw out our Mark Charles stands, toolboxes, and be prepared to work on 5-6 guys' bikes. Yeah. And it was me and the Harry show. And pretty much, and we did our own tires and our own everything. And it was pretty tiring for 2 guys. I mean, I'll be honest, back in the day being a mechanic, on the road, was a tough deal because we didn't have cell phones. That was the best thing. We didn't have a freaking cell phone. I loved it. That was the biggest. That's my favorite part of traveling the country. I'll just be upfront with you. That was the biggest. I traveled every square inch of this country. That was the biggest, most fun of this. Part of my industry was just traveling. I'll tell you.
So now, were you hitting nationals at that time? Let me just.
We did. I did a few nationals. I went and I worked for with DG. I had an opportunity to work for Gary Simmons, go on the road with Gary, but I also went on the road with Mike Bell, and I went on the road with a lot of David Taylor and the Gary Dentons and the Tessitors and the Dolmans, and I could go on and on, but I really had a lot of fun with going with Gary Simmons. I remember going out with traveling the country in a van with him, and all we had back then was box fans, and and it was fun. We ate good. We got paid a certain amount of money. Whether we were sponsored, had a support from Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki. We'd always get bikes, parts, etc. Whatever riders we were working for, like Simmons. I remember with Gary, we got the very first water-cooled 250 that came over from Japan. And I had to drive and pick it up at the airport and crate, put it together, listen to him bitch and moan about it's not jetted right or whatever, because he's used to riding the old air-cooled.
Well, wait a minute. Hey, Ted, what you're talking about, Gary Simmons riding for what factory?
For DG.
For DG, and you're picking up a water-cooled what, Honda?
Yeah, water-cooled 250 from Suzuki. It was the first one that came over because he was at the time had the support gig. I'm not sure, he was between rides, so he asked me to go on the nationals with him, and so I went. I remember being at Unadilla, and it was tough because when you get a brand new bike right from Japan and you got your other air cooled dialed, and we've been testing with that at his ranch, you know, in Lisbon, Ohio. I mean, he had the perfect place to ride and track on the property. He had like 80 acres, and so it was a lot of fun to go and do all that. And his family was great to be with too, because they fed us. You know, we ate good at the Bmx house. We ate good at the Boykos too.
So, let me just slow you down just a little bit here, because I don't really want to miss anything. We're talking about Gary Bmx on a Suzuki.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
you're in Ohio and you're hitting some races, but you're working for DG, and he's got like a support deal from Suzuki at the time. Is that it?
Yeah, he got bikes and parts, and that was the very first one, and so it was tough. He didn't really want to ride that water cooled at Unadilla. All the Japanese did at the time, and it was a cold morning. I remember going through Tech. He was bitching and moaning because he would rather ride the air cooled because it was, you know, dialed in suspension, and he's picky, you know, all the riders are anyways. But you know, it's hard to bring a new bike to a rider that they haven't had a bunch of time on.
Okay.
But they were pushing him to ride. I think he rode it anyways, and he did okay. I mean, Gary's a good rider. Period. He's strong as an ox, man. I mean, till this day, I haven't spoke to him lately, but I see him doing his thing with his schools, and he's a really good dude.
Now, yeah, he is. Gary is a good guy. Now, I want to ask you this, Ted. When I remember speaking, I had Harry here doing an interview a couple of months ago, and he mentioned to me, I guess it was 76, and I can't remember the full details of it, but he said Yamaha suddenly just inundated DG with a bunch of bikes and said, "Here, put your guys on these." And then you did have quite a team of Yamahas with all these modifications from DG. But when they give you a bike, Yamaha or whomever gives you a bike, where do you get the feedback from? Do you ride it yourself and say, you know what, I'm going to raise the port, I'm going to lower this, I'm putting a bigger carb? Where does all that begin before you come up with this totally sweet bike that works at every level? Do you ride it first and figure it out, or where does all that come from?
Well, Harry had a lot to do. I ran the mini team pretty much.
Yeah.
Which was I can name a lot of riders that we had. We had opportunity to have all these Yamahas that we were given, and we got to deck them all out. And so we were making package racers like we did everywhere I was at TK Racing. Did package racers. Vulcan, we did package racers. So at DG, we were doing package racers all done up. And the mini thing was it was big at the time. So we had Chris Heiser. God, there was a handful, 3 or 4 of mini riders, and that's where and then Harry and I'll just tell you straight up, Harry would come up with all of the stuff that we would do for production. Harry had a lot to do with whatever this heads would be CC'd out at, whatever the port specs would be, and I would go in there, and there was times that I would grind. Oh God, I've been grinding cylinders my whole life.
Yeah.
Sorry, but
no, that's okay.
I'd say that I probably done more than the average guy. I don't know. I've probably done more than most guys in the industry. I would tell you that because I've been doing it forever. And I did them even when I left DG. I started in the garage porting every cylinder head for them in the garage. At a shop at the house. And when I left there, I started a full-page ad in DG. Under the Boyko Racing name, but only watercraft, and they sold my product in the DG catalog. And that's kind of how when I ventured out of DG, I was making my own product. But see, DG was my selling point, if you understand what I'm talking about.
I do.
So they sold I was the very first guy to ever make an impeller for a jet ski. When stand-up jet skis first came out, I was a little ahead of the game. So I made, for Kawasaki, would give me bikes and parts like, you know, Yamaha did, Honda, or for us at DG. I got these Kawasaki's and I started testing them and making intake grates, and I casted up impellers. And Donnie Emler was so good at casting, he actually helped me with my tooling to make my first impeller for for the impeller I sold through DG.
Okay.
You know, that's how tight I was with Donnie, because he was really good with sandcasting. Donnie was the king of sandcasting.
Yeah.
That you know, he made his own reed cages before anybody. They were all rough looking, but he really helped me make my first sandcasting. But I sold a ton of jet ski parts through the DG line, and that's how I kind of ventured off on my own under the Boyko Racing name, making jet ski accessories when I left DG.
Ted, I also want to ask you, while you were at DG, because my brother was into BMX and I went to a lot of races with him back in the late 70s, early 80s. You talked about the bicycles. Now, where did the idea to make BMX bikes come from, and were the frames made there? Tell me a little bit about the BMX history there at DG.
It was a big part of the business. I'll tell you straight up. We had, there was this guy named Robinson, who passed away, I believe. But if you remember Robinson bicycles,
I absolutely do.
They were monster big.
Yeah.
Prior to Robinson, he was working for us at DG in house, and so he was already into this stuff. And then we had Jeff Botima was one of our riders that my brother had somehow got on board, who I had no idea, which became a close friend of our family and always come to the house and stuff. Jeff was one of these fast. He could ride a motorcycle, BMX, anything, and it was a big part of the business. It was productive. We had a lot of money being made there. It was huge, and so and we were making them in house. Far as the marketing side of it, that was not me. I didn't really have anything to do with the bicycle things, other than maybe bringing some people on board to help out with manufacturing in house. And that was a friend of mine from high school, that because they were subbing the stuff out prior, and then finally came in and started doing stuff in house at DG on the bicycles. But it was a big part of our thing. I forgot to mention it. It was a huge part of our.
I know it was, Ted, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it. And
Glad you brought it up.
Yeah,
didn't say anything about it.
No, and there's something else that's on my mind too. And I knew that throughout your time in school, you really were into Greek mythology. And I know you worked at DG, and they had a cruiser. They had a bike, a cruiser, 24-inch bike, and it was called the Vulcan.
Yeah.
Did you have anything to do with that?
No, I think they might have stole the name from it, because at the time Vulcan was already defunct and done, you know, because we weren't going to do anything with it anymore.
Okay.
And, so I think that's might have where that came from, to be honest.
Okay. I was just wondering because of the Vulcan name.
Because it became a big deal.
Yeah. Now,
Sure did.
you mentioned a couple of times that some guys, after races or certain events, they would always wind up back at the Boyko house. Your mom would cook, and it would always be a great time. So, why don't you tell me about some of the guys that would always go back to Casa Boyko after the races and the events there?
Wow, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because I can name, these guys came from all across the country, and they're all tight. They're all close with my mom. Vivo Forte, for one. Love my mom. Hannah. Everybody came there after race. Bruce McDougall family was really close with our family. Every Sunday, everybody's welcome. My mom would make this monster pot of sauce with meatballs and braciole. Oh my God. And it was huge. It was enough to feed an army. And not only riders come, promoters. I mean, I think I saw Bill West from Florida, from St. Pete's on. I'm hoping, Bill, you remember, if he's on, Bill West has been in my house for dinner. Promoters, it was great. My mom would welcome everybody from the East Coast, whether it was a racer, promoter. I mean, the Murphys. Paul Murphy was a DG rider. Mark Murphy, his dad, was the most hardcore dude I ever met in my life. I remember going to Florida, being out there at a national, And the dad, I said something to him, and he come out and he brought that gun out that scared the shit out of me. He shot the gun, Teddy, I'm gonna get that. He shot that. And I remember Mark says, he's gonna shoot you, Teddy. And I mean, honestly, he shot that gun in the air, scared that because he was a tough dude, the Paul Murphy. So all these people, make a lot of stories. My mom was the best at letting people come to the house.
Yeah.
Letting them not go being screw ups out in the street. Let's come to the Boyko family, shoot pool, have fun. We used to, Doug DeMocas lived at my house for a lot of, I would say maybe a year before he got his own place when he came from Michigan. And we would always play jarts. Do you remember the game jarts?
Yeah.
It was dangerous.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But dude, we had jart games in the backyard. We had this monster big backyard with fruit trees and shit. And I remember we'd all have fun, and there would be tons of us. But the Bebos were the ones that come out more than it because it was annual. It became an annual thing at the Boykos from Saddleback Park days, but it mainly became a thing from Supercross. Once Supercross started, even from Super Bowl motocross, we started that far back. Bevo coming over. I mean, I think even Goodwin might have been at my house once or twice. I could name some names. These are some rough names. I'll name a few.
Yeah.
If you remember, oh my God, Lorenz Hoffner.
Yeah. LOP
he
industry.
showed up at the house one day.
Yeah.
That wasn't good. My mom has allowed everybody at the house. Emler, Doug Nickel, it doesn't matter. We've had a lot of fun at my house. But man, after Lorenz showed up with the LOP, flew in a plane, he was a mess. And I was told, don't ever let that guy in the home again. But everybody else was. And we just had some great times. My mom wanted us to be there, and the dinners were outstanding. You know, you're Italian. And she made sure that nobody left there that wasn't full. And,
yeah.
But I was really kind of lucky to be around those guys coming to this house. Who would have thought? You know, I mean, honestly, these were my people that I loved, and whether they were racers or whatever, we had an opportunity to hang together and just have fun. That's one thing in my life. I'll tell you straight, my whole entire life, from a little guy playing drums and doing whatever, I've always made a point. You wake up every day and have the best day of your life.
Yeah.
Every day. So I've made a point to do that. I'm still doing it. And that's why I'm still doing what I do.
Now, there was something. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. You know, you mentioned being on the road with Bmx a little while back, but there were some other guys that came up through the ranks who were not very famous at the time, but you had to be there at DG when a lot of other guys came up through there. Who are some of the other racers that came through the doors at DG when you were there?
Wow, they were all. There was Gary Denton, David Taylor, John Tessitore, Mike Bell, Graham Noyce, got Andre Malherbe. I mean, there's some European guys too, not just Americans.
Oh yeah, but I mean, Noyce and Malherbe, they were already on their way, no? Or were they their first times in America and that was their base? How did guys like Malherbe and Graham Noyce get there?
Because of my brother. My brother was the king of marketing. You know, bringing these guys over and throwing a sticker on the helmet or and working with, you know, and I think the Bebos. My brother was pretty tight with a lot of the guys in the industry today. And had a great name and working with people. So I think that's where a lot of that would come in, whether he would pay them or I don't know what he worked out, but he always worked out somehow to promote, you know, whatever my brother was marketing. That's what he did.
Yeah. I remember Noyce being on a factory Honda and seeing DG stickers on his helmet. And I thought to myself, that is really peculiar, you know, but you know, you didn't know at the time what we know today, you know, this morning that we're we're getting all this great information from you. So, hey, Ted, were there?
As far as the writers, but real quick, I didn't mention them
Yeah.
all, but there was a lot of other writers too that come out of there. That was like, Mark Murphy, Chris Heiser, quite a few other they were mini guys that became motocross guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was so many. I mean, Mark Tyre, tons of riders that I unnamed that I could go on and on. So it's one thing that, and then FMF also, was doing the same thing because we were competitors.
But you guys were friendly competitors.
Oh my God, we were.
Yeah.
At least I was really close with Uncle D from the day one.
Yeah. Hey, while I'm thinking about it, you just brought up a name a minute ago, and I got to ask you kind of a personal question. Bruce McDougal, there was a huge fire at his house, or near his house just a few days ago. Is everything settled down there? Is Bruce okay?
He just, funny, he just called me prior to this show.
Yeah.
And because I left him 3 voicemails worried about him, and he is okay. I got to tell you, he's lucky. He saved his van.
The picture was on the cover. It was on the cover of the New York Times.
But the house took a hit, man. 5 of the windows blew out. Double pane windows. He's really, really lucky. Lost a bunch of vehicles. Dad's old Toyota and a bunch of other stuff. But he's going to be all right.
All right.
I'm glad that he called me today. He's really, really lucky.
Yeah.
Because he's the only one that didn't lose the home. All the other homes, and he told me today, which was sad, is all the animals they lost up there. And nobody got up there in time. Normally, prior to a fire, they get up there with trucks and trailers, and they truck out the horses and all the stuff. And he said, dude, it was not good. So, yeah, I feel for him, and I just wished him well. And
yeah, Bruce.
I told him if he needed any help, man, I'm there for him, because Bruce is a big part of Boyko Racing here. When I built this place, the new building, we've been so close. He's in the building industry, and he actually sponsored every piece of lumber in this new shop of mine.
Is that right?
And yes, he did. That's how tight we are. And he's influenced me too in my racing career. I mean, I tell you straight up, he used to help me, teach me how to start, because I couldn't start with the shit. Bruce would take me, "This is how you do it, Teddy." And so we've been really tight with the McDougals, and yeah, I'm glad you asked about him.
I'm glad he's okay. And Bruce, if you're listening, you were in our thoughts and prayers, and we're glad you're okay. So, but yeah, it just came up, and I had to ask about it, although it wasn't. Hey, it may have not been part of the interview, but it's something that's been on my mind and on my heart, and I wanted to know about that. Where else, Ted? Who else did you help as far as factory racers go? Because I think I heard, I don't want to call it a rumor, but I heard that when some of the works bikes, some of the factories didn't quite get the results they wanted out of their research and development, that you were brought on board for a couple of them to get things sorted out. How true is that?
I sure was. When Donnie had what was it? Danny Smith era, 2 strokes. It was all 125s. Donnie had the factory Honda team.
Yeah.
And they had a rig with a big wing on it, and they hired me to through Cliff White, who else was over there at the time running racing, and hired me on the side, paid me just to stuff all the cases, do the crankshafts, CC out all the heads. And I brazed the power valves a certain way because they had a little gap in the power valves, which was an issue. And then I had a jig that Honda provided me for the pistons, because they wanted them a certain length and the skirts a certain way. And I mean, they're really picky at Honda on what they wanted. And I remember how I got the gig, is you got to cooperate with what Honda wants. They'll give you whatever you want. At the time, and Donnie was getting, a lot of stuff. He's getting money, parts. That's how he paid for the rig.
Mm-hmm.
And he had these riders he had to take care of. And I think at the time, Varner might have been over there. And Varner, I don't know what was going on, but there was, no cooperation, or I didn't want to get into it, but somehow they weren't cooperating with the boss mans in R&D at Honda. and they're trying to tell him what to do, and he wasn't wanting to do it. And so somehow that's how I got the call from Big D. Hey, I got a good gig for you if you want to do it. And so I was grateful because I think I was working at Mission. Might have been working at Mission Motorsports at the time when I got that gig. And I did those in-house, and no one knew that I did them. You sign a confidentiality agreement. You just get paid on the side, and that, which is a good thing. It's a good way to go because you're not under the corporate umbrella. And you do everything on your own. You send them an invoice, and you get paid. And I've done a lot of that throughout the years. You know, through Honda, Yamaha. I've been pretty lucky. I've done a really cool deal with Don MD. I was, Bob Starr got me on board on I don't know if you know this, but I did the Cannonball run with Don MD.
No, I didn't know that.
I built all the bikes. First it was KTM's, and Don, I had to deck these KTM's out for this project, and it was Finding Cannonball's Trail. And I remember Don called me years ago, hey, because I've always been tight with the MDs. I helped with this brother's road race bikes, TZ 750s, going to Daytona back in the day. So I was always close with the MDs. So Don gets me on board, says, you want to do this Cannonball gig? And I go, yeah. That was about 2 years prior. Next thing you know, I shows up in my shop with these brand new KTM's, and him and Joe Colombrero got to have them all decked out by a certain day, and this and that. And they're going to write a book. They're going to do a movie, and they're going to do this. And I'm going, really? Okay. And they show me a whole truck full of parts, and I got put on these things. So I deck them out, and it was great. It was probably one of the funnest things I've done throughout the industry. Don's probably one of the most awesome guys I've ever met in the industry, straight out. He's always given me every projects to do since I was a little guy and help him out with projects and make money. So this was a golden. I made a lot of money on this deal, and it was Bob Starr ended up involved. So make a long story short, we get these KTM's. KTM says, we're going to give you a Don for the chase vehicle, a bunch of dough, and all this, on and on and on. And prior to them being what they are today, they didn't have a bunch of money. They ran out of dough. And Don comes over and says, now you got to take them apart. And I'm going, what? I mean, I just put a ton of work in this thing. I tear them apart, make a long story short, hand them back to KTM. And this is when the AMA, he had a deal with the AMA, was pissed off at the AMA at the time, and hand back to KTM's. Next thing I know, Bob Starr's involved. Bob calls me and says, I'm delivering Super Tenerays this week. Got to be a special Kenny Roberts yellow with a special logo and blah, blah, blah by this date. I go, really? So next thing I know, I do anything for Don. If Don MD told me jump, I jump. So I had to prep these Yamahas for this project, which ended up being such a cool project, Finding Cannonball's Trail. If anybody hasn't read the book or seen the book and read any books that Don MD's ever promoted out there, they need to buy one.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm part of the book, not to pimp myself here, but I'm inside the book throughout from the beginning to the end, on and off. And it was just one of the funnest projects, and I'm glad I had an opportunity to do it with them, and with some really golden people that I work with to do the project. And Bob Starr, I think everybody was happy at the end of the project.
Yeah.
And I was just praying that it survived.
And it did.
They went, they followed Cannonball's Trail.
Yeah.
And it was really, if you look at it, it was fun. And we started at the exact same time 100 years later. And it was a big deal for me to do this. And so I couldn't screw up. And I remember Don give me, he's strict and everything got to be perfect. And so I was worried the whole time that we did it. And it was a nice project for me and some history to put in the history books for myself. Another one for me, put in the history books.
Absolutely. Hey, Ted, a little earlier, you mentioned Scott Wallenberg had taken out an ad in Racer X, which, of course, is a fabulous magazine. I was running through some pictures. I saw a picture of his Monarch at this vintage Inter-Am in Idaho that they hold every year. On that Monarch is a sticker, Boyko Racing. Did you work on that bike? Did you do anything to that bike for him?
Yes, I did. I built that motor for Scott. The first motor was a little weak that he had originally, but Scott had prior to Monarch really going to take off, they had a factory motor ready for Marty Smith. Marty Smith was going to be, he was a factory Monarch guy.
Yes. And
they had this motor that came from Bernd Blonderblag, or what, I don't know how to say the name, from Sweden. And he was nice enough to send me the specs from Sweden of the cylinder specs, the case porting, and whatnot. And Scott acquired him, talked him into emailing to me. I got David, Ellie Sleeve, and Nick to get on board and help me make some sleeves with an auxiliary port. These specs had this auxiliary port because, the motor was weak because it only had one transfer port. And there's really not a lot of room to put in this auxiliary port. It's a really difficult machine process to do. I ended up doing I didn't want to do just one. So I ended up doing I think 6 total. And they all went like wildfire for big bucks, the cylinder heads.
Yeah.
So I had these sleeves made from Dave and Nick, which cost me a fortune to do. And even when you go to bore, drop these sleeves in, these old air-cooled Monarch cylinders, there's minimal cylinder wall to drop the sleeve in, so I had to really come up. The sleeve had to be made perfectly counterboard, and it has to be centered just right. So I did a lot of the machine work prior to dropping the sleeve in. But you have to start these, I want to call them starter holes on the mill where I run them in, because you can't screw up. You'll come out right into the pins, into the air. So that's where that motor is so strong, so powerful. Marty, too bad Marty didn't get an opportunity to ride it, because if he would have, he would have killed it, because it was so fast. It had this auxiliary port, and that's why that motor that Scott has runs so damn well. I'll straight up. So I had and I didn't even know if I could do it, Joe. This was a project. I don't think anybody in the industry would have taken it on. I've done a few things that I've taken on, and it really was tough to do.
Yeah, well, Ted, that's why I'm asking you about it, because I did a little research on it. I knew it was something that not a lot of people would even attempt. And the fact that you did it and the bike is so reliable and so fast, I really thought the listeners, and for people who will be listening to this interview in the future, would like to know just how far your talents really go. So,
and I was just glad to get these specs, because I had no idea what was involved, and he was kind enough to send me everything, and that was because of Scott. So yeah, there's not very many of these motors out there. So I think there's maybe, actual running right now, there might be 3 of them, and one of them is a guy in Nevada who I built one for.
Right.
I think there's another guy in Idaho that's just acquired one from somehow, because I've done some stuff for Dave Miller prior, God bless him, before he died.
Yeah.
I've always done stuff for Dave on and off. Me and Dave were never super close, but I always, here and then, he would bring me cylinder to bore, and everybody thought Dave did it, but I did stuff for Dave here and there. And so his famous Monarch that everybody thought he did, I ended up doing some of the stuff for him on that, but nobody knew. And then I somehow, somebody got some of his stuff since he's passed, has got some in Idaho, and then some of the stuff people who acquired his sack stuff is showing up here that I'm redoing right now. So stuff's showing up because of somehow they got it through Dave.
Yeah. Hey Ted, every week I get a couple of questions from listeners who send in questions before the interview actually begins. So I'd like to ask them ask you the questions that they had. The first one was from Fritz Gunther. He says he's got a Mako crank with 4 large holes adjacent to the pin. Would filling them in and balancing the crank be worth the effort?
Hang on, let me put my piece back and it just fell out.
Okay.
Okay, Fritz, if you're out there, I love Fritz. He's one of my clients. Yeah, on the Mako, it's a difficult one to stuff. It's some big old crank. I think I did a crank for Fritz. I think if I remember right, and I do remember those holes. Fritz, if you're listening, yeah, definitely would help it. Just you got to make sure you stuff these things in a proper manner. Yeah, it definitely help increase the crank pressure. We could possibly do it. I've never done one. I'll just be upfront with you on a Mako. I haven't done. The Makos have been showing up lately. I'm doing one for Fritz as we speak.
Oh, okay.
Fritz, I'm in the process of doing your sleeve. So Fritz sent me a sleeve that I'm doing. His is broken. So what I did is I had to make a piece of tooling to pull his sleeve out and pop the new sleeve in. If you're listening, that's what I'm doing, Fritz. But yeah, to answer your question, it would help it. But if I remember right, there's 4 holes in those journals, two on each side.
Mm-hmm.
Big holes. We'd have to make sure you make some big stuffers to do it, and make sure they don't fly out of there, and do it right.
Got another question from one of our sponsors, Amsoil. The guy is Russell Waters. Russell would like to know, what's the best modification a racer can do to a vintage engine to make it run as best as possible without sacrificing reliability?
Keeping the air cleaner clean is the first thing that comes to my mind of any of these bikes can stay running, and whether it's a 2-stroke or 4-stroke. Joe, to answer his question, is the key, because I build engines every day.
Yeah.
And so I preach air filter and airbox. And believe it or not, I'll ship an engine to back East Coast, and these guys will have an airbox you won't believe who's calling into me right now. Brock Glover.
You tell him you're on with Joe Abadi, you got to call him back.
I'm not even going to answer. So that's going to piss him off right there.
Oh, well.
No, we're friends. I love Brock.
Yeah.
No, we go way back. If anybody can give me shit, Brock can.
So tell me about the airbox problems.
So what I was saying is, I've always preached that that's the key thing that these kids and anybody have a hard time with. And putting the oil, consuming the right amount of oil in the air filter so it breathes well. So there's a certain way to put it on, a certain way to grease it, and everybody neglects it. For some damn reason, they neglect the transmission oil and neglect the air filter oil. Most of them are smart enough to at least mix their 2-stroke oil, but I'm really anal with all 3 of these things, because without those 3 key things,
yeah,
we're screwed.
Yeah, that's the best thing to do to make sure that engine keeps running smoothly. Sure.
And the tranny, I split cases probably more than the average guy in the business, as I got piles of engines in here that come in created from all across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grateful for that. But I physically have done a lot of little bench tests and work with a lot of oil companies. I'm really picky with what goes in the tranny and how the splashes on the gears, and really concerned on the clutch side of it as well. So yeah, clutch, tranny oil, air filter oil, and mixing the 2-stroke oil right, and then also the viscosities in the 4-stroke is an issue too. Guys, a lot of guys are using, say you're in Arizona, Nevada, you're doing Baja, they just go by the book and they're running thin oil in there like it says in the manual.
Mm-hmm.
And in my engines that we built, I just built 2 450s for Baja guys, and we go in there and we run in there a little bit thicker viscosity on the engine oil, because they don't hold any, Joe. They don't hold shit.
Yeah.
They hold these new 450s, whether it's I build a lot of the new generation engine. I do vintage, but I do a lot of new era engines that nobody knows about. I do a ton of, I run an Encycler and, Racer X, it points to both. So we do a lot of the new generation engines, and that's one thing with the new generation engines. The materials, cases blow up easier. I see Honda 450s and 250s come in here with the cases grenaded that you won't believe what you see. They're not. You can't weld them like we used to be able to weld them back together. You know, they're destroyed because they put too many hours on these things. And so I'm really picky on the oil viscosities. And yeah, really big point for everybody to hear. It's their job when you build them an engine, ship it, to take care of that motor so it has long life.
Sure.
And I use in all my engines, I use the highest quality Japanese product in just about every motor that goes out of here, whether it's a Husky. I mean, I just built a Husky that just shipped out of here and with all Japanese product.
Mm-hmm.
Saved the guy a ton of money because the Husky motor, a valve in these brand new Huskies are $160 a valve. My cost. In a brand new Husky 450, 160 OE. So what I do, these guys are bringing me heads from Three Brothers or wherever they're coming from, and I'll port it, do them a head to ship out. I'll send them up, put the thing back together with a really nice 3-angle hand cut with a hand lap, depending on if it's a tie valve or not, or a steel valve, whatever it is, and provide them with a Prox product, which is going to be better than what came in the KTM and the Husky in the first place.
Yeah, and of
so
course, yeah. No, I'm
trying to gain more life out of these motors is what I'm trying to do.
I get it, Ted. I get it for sure, because a lot of people are, look, I don't know how to. There's a lot of people that are, especially our generation guys, the guys 55 or even 40, late 40s to early 60s. They're all against these 4-strokes because they blow up and they cost a fortune to repair.
That's right.
And
which is really shifted. It's when the 4-strokes came out, Joe.
Yeah.
Everybody jumped on the plan.
Yeah.
And then when they found out that they cost, because I'll tell you straight up, I built a shitload of them, and these guys, they cry. Every one of them, when you do a 4-stroke, they cry. They all whine, okay, because they forget that you got 8 billion parts in this thing,
right?
Okay, and the 2-stroke, on the other hand, I can do for almost free, okay, and the guy never sees you if he does the filter right and does all the things right. So they get butt hurt. So that whole situation, though, is haunted. I'll tell you what's happened. I've seen a shift because that's something Wallenberg asked me recently, because they monitor my ads on my hits and everything. And we were talking about that on the percentages right now on right now, I would say that it's a 50-50 deal coming through here, half vintage, half new.
Mm-hmm.
And strong on both ends.
Well, that's good.
The problem is with the vintage, especially in the 1980 era, whether it is, doesn't matter what brand, anything 1980, good luck. I mean, I finished a couple 1980. I finished a 1979 Yamaha for guy. I want to say not too long ago I posted it. Beautiful bike. Trying to get a part for that 79 Yamaha that I had Clark Jones help me with the suspension, because Ross and Enzo couldn't do it. Me and Ross go way back from DG. We were, I was his first customer, I think, at DG actually. So I always send everything to Ross, and they sent the 79 shock and the front forks over to Ross. He goes, I can't do it. What do you mean you can't do it? He says, I can't do it. He was going to send it to Paul D, and I said, no, you ain't doing that.
So you did the suspension on it too?
Yeah.
Okay.
I sent it to Clark Jones because he's always good and been great with me, and I love Clark. And he did him for me, and I got him right back to me for reasonable. Because if I went over to Race Tech, that would have, even though I know Paul D from way back and he was David Taylor's buddy and everything, it didn't matter. I'm going to pay a price that's stupid. So I had Clark handle it, and Clark took really good care of me on the project. But back to what I was saying, 1980 parts for Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, especially the Honda ones with the magnesium cases.
They're very
I
good.
get a ton of them coming in here. Mike Bell just brought me one for his son Trevor.
Mm-hmm.
the reason why I can't finish this motor for Trevor right now is because it's the magnesium cases. They're all rotted out. They're trying to find stuff on eBay. It's really difficult. So yeah, that's the one thing I'm pointing out is the 1980 stuff is tough to get, man. So if anybody's out there listening, 79 and 80, stay away from them on the biddies, man, unless you got a fat wallet. Because I think what I paid for the piston.
No, I know. Hey, Ted, you're preaching to the choir. I realize how expensive. You know, I know what it costs. So, hey, Ted, tell me this. Let's talk about your family a little bit. How long are you married? How many kids you got?
Oh my God, I've been married now 32 years. Wife Sue Petrelli. I'm grateful for that because she rocks and she's the one who drives Boyko Racing and drives me to be the man that I am and the perfect guy to make sure I do good. And she's Italian, strong-willed. She's spiritual. She's got great spiritual sense of humor. She's just great all the way around. And great vibe. You'll love her. You met her. Your wife Sue and I, we've all met, and she's hopefully when this pandemic ends, that you get to come and hang out with us for dinner. Because my wife does the same as my mom with dinner on Sundays.
Absolutely.
And just I'm so glad. I never had kids.
I didn't know that, Ted.
Yeah, we tried. We went through that whole ordeal, and Brock. I remember when I had lost my wife had lost 2 or 3. I think it was 3 we had, and but make a long story short, we were going to adopt. We ended up not adopting, and I'm a kid, a 63-year-old kid myself. I'm a godparent to all the nieces and nephews. I've taken all the nieces and nephews to every rock concert from, and that's no shit, every weenie roast, whether it was Motorhead, Metallica. I've taken these kids to see everybody. Dave Grohl before he was at Foo Fighters. And they were all lucky because who else can take them? So my wife would drop me off with all these kids. I mean, I remember taking 7, 8 kids one time to a gig, and just having a blast. So that was something that I always did, was try to take the kids. I've always been into music. It was either going to be drums, be a rock star. I played in a band, through elementary and junior high, all the whole time as in a band, and then I played every day here.
I wanted to ask you about that, Ted, because I know you got a couple of friends, Scott Wallenberg, of course, Scott Cox, and I know you're pretty tight with Lyle Lovett as well. But you do have a musical background, and what do you got? Your drums at your shop?
I actually, because of Scott Wallenberg and Scott Cox, I'd say Scott. If it wasn't for Scott Cox, he dialed me in, dude. He brought in this guitar that's so beautiful. It's a Fender Stratocaster signature model, Blackie they call it. And Scott and both Cox and him both went to Crossroads with Clapton, and then so it's even meant more to me. And so he brought me that. So I have a little studio here set up. I have my Fender. I have an old trainer amp in here, and I set up a drum kit that me and Cox and Lyle and a bunch of us go to this called the NAMM show. That's at City of Anaheim every year. It's like a dealer show for motorcycles, but it's all instruments. We see Bob Starr there every year because Yamaha's so big into NAMM.
Mm-hmm.
And so we bought this kit. And all these little, for instance, all these companies have to start somewhere with their music and their instruments. So they start out there with a 10x10 and grow. So I bought this kit from a Brazilian guy. I wandered this whole exhibit show and bought the kit. I didn't even have all the money. So between me, Wallenberg, Scott Cox, I don't know, a bajillion years ago we did it, and rolled it. We borrowed a cart from this Mexican guy that was working there with the trash, and I think I gave him a 10 or a 20 spot to get his cart so we could stack this kit. And my wife had no idea. We drove her Lexus. This is me, Wallenberg, and Cox, and my wife's Lexus. You know, going to this thing, and she has no idea. Well, we brought drumsticks home the day before that, and that was it. But then on the Sunday, Scott says, "Oh, we got to go on Sunday. That's where we make the deals, and I'm going to make the deal with you, Teddy." So he calls his drummer buddy and finds out this kit's worth a lot of money. So it's a Brazilian-made kit called Dairy, and I now have a Ludwig snare and some double throw-down pasty cymbals, and I got a Lars Ulrich double pedal bass, and I've been building this kit more and more, but I play every day.
Yeah.
And it's something that's part of my life because it's with the pandemic and all. You know, I meditate a lot. I do, believe it or not, you don't think so, but that's part of my life. And that's one reason why I'm so positive. And this is part of my meditation, believe it or not. Playing drums every day is so good for your mind.
Are you there now? Are you sitting at the drums now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, listen, give me a little thing on the drum. Just go 15 seconds or so. Ted, don't go all Neil Peart on me for a half hour.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do you a John Bonham triplet. How's that?
All right.
A little triplet. It ain't gonna be much because it might over rev you here. So let's see what we do here. Let me hang on. Let me see if I can. Hang on a minute. Let me see what I can do. That was my double bass pedal right there. So let's see what I can roll here. I'll do a little triplet. Let's see with my snare. I don't know if you can hear that.
I can hear it.
That's called a triplet. So I'm working that's my single tom. There's my big tom, floor tom. There's my two pedals. So what I'm going to do is a little triplet. I'll do it a few times. And that's the famous John Bonham. Jason Bonham does it better than anybody. It's hard to do.
Boyko, just play the drums, Ted. Play the drums.
Here we go.
Wow.
All right, Ted. Are you there?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm here.
All right. Listen, I got one more question for you, and then we're going to jump for today. But I think it's a pretty good one. Here it is. I mean, as a racer and a mechanic, what do you think was your absolute best day in your long career? What's that one day that always stands out in your mind?
Oh my gosh. Funnest things I think was hanging out with Uncle D.
With Donnie Emler?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Me and Donnie were probably the wilder bunch of I'll just tell you straight up, nobody could hang with us.
Huh. So tell me what
Uncle D and I traveling with him was probably one of the funnest things we've ever did because he was always fun to be with. And we're still to this day.
Yeah.
We don't drink anymore. Thank God. Because both of us were a mess. And we straightened our lives out.
Yeah.
And both of us were going sideways drinking. And me and him completely changed our lives. And we're lucky to be alive. And we both agreed that God wants us here to put smiles on everybody's faces. And we both changed our lives. We're both doing the same thing that we did when we started. And we're still friends till this day. And I could say that, yeah, whenever we get together, whether it's at Supercross, whether we're anywhere,
yeah,
and we see each other, we're smiling and talking about the old times and the things that we did. And he has a memory bank better than mine. But
there's no one day, Ted, at a race or something that you could say, hey, there was that time. Or are you just telling me that every day is great when you're with Donnie Emler?
Oh, every day is great with Donnie Emler, wherever. And honest God, every day is great wherever I am, period.
Good.
I'm going to make today the best day of my life.
That's great to hear, Ted. And
I'm going to get on the phone here when we're done here, and I'm going to call Brock and we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Well, hey, Ted, I want to thank you for spending some time with me today. I really enjoyed your stories. For anyone that's listening, go visit Boyko Racing on Facebook and online. And if it floats, flies, or rolls, I think Ted can make it go faster or run better. Ted, thanks so much for talking to me today. And get a hold of Pat Alexander. Let's get Pat on next week.
I'll get him on for you. I'll talk to him today. He's my next door neighbor, and I promise you he'll do it for you, Joe. And I really appreciate you inviting me on the show. And I want to thank all my wife, my friends, my family, and all the people that have supported me throughout the years, especially the people who send me engines to this day.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for these guys, I'll tell you right up, I have a great life. I'm blessed, and I have lots of friends, and I'm just grateful for being able to do what I did when I started and to still be doing it today. And thanks for having me on your show.
You are welcome, Ted. Thank you again.
All right, and we'll talk soon.
All right, Teddy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
My guest today at Vintage Motocross Radio has been Ted Boyko. The show, of course, is made possible thanks to our sponsors, Preston Petty Products, the legend continues, AMSOIL, the first in synthetic oil since 1973. Full Circle Racing for rims, spokes, lacing, and truing. For vintage and modern, be sure to visit Full Circle Racing online. Vinco, keep the ride going with over 650 products in their catalog. Motion Pro for specialized tools, cables, and controls. Golan Industries, be sure to check out their fuel filter online. I also want to welcome two new sponsors, Northwest Mako CZ. Thank you, Alan Brown. Please follow them on Facebook and online. And of course, Lanny J, building some beautiful aluminum gas tanks for CZs, Makos, and Bultacos. Follow Lanny J on Facebook. Thank you, everyone, for listening today to Vintage Motocross Radio. I am your host, Joe Abadi. Please join me on Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for a new episode of Vintage Motocross Q&A. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and thanks for listening.